And we are live with the big screen. Hello, everybody. This is Pablo Vazquez, live from the Blender Animation Studio here in Amsterdam for another episode of Blender.Today. Today it's gonna be an episode full of improvements all over the place. 2.82 is still under beta and I'm still getting a lot of fixes. Like I try to pick a few fixes that I consider that are very important and worth sharing, but mentioning all of them, it's a bit just too much. There's so many fixes, and also in the 2.83 branch is also getting a bunch of fixes that maybe are a bit more risky and not like it can be put into 2.82, like fixes that involve a lot more rewriting, for example. But there is the section that I've been using. I've been using the last couple of weeks. The future is awesome. It's actually going to be a bit mind blowing, especially if you've been keeping track of Twitter news on Blender lately. It's just all over the place. I bet those hardcore followers are gonna they know already what I'm talking about. So, all right, without further ado, let's get started. I don't have many community news today, except that we are live like every Monday. So if you want to ask your question that I'm going to try answering towards the end of the show, in the second half, depends on how many features, new stuff we have to share, go to Blender.community, and there's a thread called Improvements Galore, then with the name of this video, where you can ask your questions. There's already 10 comments that I'm going to try and answer towards the end of the show. Guests. I don't know if I'm going to have guests today because the developers were a bit too busy at the moment. We're the developer Jack Luke from Germany came all the way here for a week to hang out and talk about the Everything Notes project. And the idea was to get him here, but like I went downstairs to check, but they were like super busy, and like 5 developers writing on the walls and thinking and mentioning notes a bunch of times. So yeah, I'm gonna leave them work. Let's see how this goes. So 2.82, there's a bunch of fixes in 2.82 that are worth mentioning. Mainly the fixes, for example, on the fluids. Fluids, there's like dozens and dozens of fixes for Manta Flow, but there are also better defaults. For example, when you should start, when you add a Manta Flow object like a fluid, by default it's going to be using OpenVDB, which is the most standard and better like performance and in general optimized format to use. But also there has been a lot of fixes for flow objects and initial velocity. So if you had issues with like you start your fluids and then boom, the initial velocity is crazy, that should be fixed. So give it a second try. Then more fixes. This is hard to show, but some Eevee fixes regarding normal maps. Also disk lights in Eevee, where I'm not going to show anything because really it's just I just wanted to get them out there. The disk lights in Eevee got a few improvements. Also in performance, remember that in Eevee, the light type, the area type disk is the most expensive you can use. So try to use them sparsely. But there were some problems with noise, like it was provoking some noise more than it should, and it was looking a bit weird. So that should be fixed. Also, if you're doing scripting and you're using, this is very niche, but if you're using USD, now you can type bpy app.usd. If I finish compiling, because I think I didn't finish. No, I think it's still compiling. Well, you can use that, bpy.app.usd, to know the version of USD that Blender is shipping with, because by the time 2.82, like USD was added to 2.82, it was using the latest version by Pixar, but now actually Pixar released a new version, so it's good to know what is Blender using, the Blender 2.82. But also, if you go from system and you say save system info, is also, if you haven't seen this, actually, it's a very nice text file that saves all your settings, your system, for example, your graphics card and the libraries that Blender is using and everything. It puts them in the nice text file that you can share with the world. So yeah, I'm actually compiling in real time tetrapixel. That is true. That's pretty cool with this new setup that I have a tiny computer for streaming and the beefy computer for recording this. That doesn't matter. I can compile and this should be still fluid. That's pretty nice. So thank you Sebastian Parborg for setting this up if you're watching, and Francesco City also for providing the production support. All right, let's move on. Blender Kit, also lots, I don't know, dozens also of fixes. So if you had issues with Blender Kit, I'm always talking of 2.82, by the way, right now. So the version that you can get from builder.blender.org or blender.org/experimental, the 2.82 beta, that's what I'm talking about. Until like now. Now I'm going to switch to 2.83. And one other thing is that the affect pattern option, this is a small one, but the affect pattern options that you have in the options panel, and you remember this option that was added maybe like a couple of months ago, that you can, for example, parent an object to another. So for example, this is the parent, and if I only want to move the parent but without the children, I can, from the options pop over, I can press parent, and then I can move the parent without moving the children. This wasn't working with snapping, actually. So if it wasn't working really well with snapping. So let's see if I can snap. Or maybe when I compiled this older version, it was already working. But for example, this one is working. But at some point it wasn't working, and this has been fixed. It's going to be included in 2.82. So pretty neat. All right, let's continue. So let's 2.83. Yes, the future. The joke aside, actually, the Grease Pencil team made a nice video that I'm going to show in a bit about the things that are working for 2.83 or 4, but the thing is that it's unknown when it's going to be, probably 2.83, but in the video they say 2.82 old, and it's funny because 2.82 hasn't been out yet. All right, so 2.83, what do we do while we wait for the compiling to end? Let's watch this video from the Grease Pencil, the one that I was mentioning. So I'm actually switching to a new section about the future is awesome. So in this section, I try to cover what is next, what is coming soon, rather soonish to Blender. In this case, it's gonna be 2.83-ish, hopefully, but it's a refactor of Grease Pencil drawing. So it basically is making it better, faster, it much more better performant. But on the way, there has been some refactor on the Draw Manager, which is like the system that draws stuff on the screen. Now Blender Grease Pencil objects are working much better with it, are much more integrated, and now they react to light. Yes, not shadows yet. That's on the way. But lights, that's amazing. You can actually light your cartoon stuff. I wonder how does it work if I want to make it shadeless though? Because how do you make it? I have to ask the guys yet. But other improvements besides performance, this 2.82 old, which is not even, it's kind of old because now we're in 2.83. Maybe this should be named or labeled as current, like the current version. At the moment of this video. So in 2.82, the strokes, if you do it really fast, they were a bit like low poly-ish. So now in 2.83, ideally, in the new one, the upcoming one, is going to have much better, much more smooth lines when you're drawing super fast. All right. Smooth corners, this is amazing. So these pointy lines that show up when you make these very narrow strokes. So when you go like up and down and you end up with these weird corners, now that has been solved. And also, I don't know if you noticed, but before, at the end of the stroke, it will like jump and do some kind of like secondary, like a composite, it would do some kind of process in the strokes. not anymore, at least from this video. So very nice. Thank you, Antonio Vazquez, for working on it, and Clément Foucault also. He's the developer of Eevee. He went ahead and made all the refactor of the Draw Manager to make it look awesome. And as part of the, like, Grease Pencil is becoming more part of like the Eevee in general. So super nice. Super nice. All right, so my Blender it's finished compiling, so I am good to start showing. So there was a sneak peek of the future is awesome, the section I'm going to talk about in a minute. But let's go first with the few things that changed, mainly regarding the user interface in 2.83. So let's go back. All right, I'm back. First, the one that you're going to maybe not notice until a while, because this change is in the info editor. Remember the info editor? Info editor, it used to be in 2.7, the one here on the top, where you could drag down and you will have like all the information of the whatever you were pressing, and the operator settings and everything. Basically, if you start baking or cancel, or all the reports basically will be there. Now they live in their own operator, on the own editor. They used to be an editor as well, but it was the info plus settings. Now in 2.8, this is like its own thing. It's a top bar. So the changes are that there are icons, among other things. So if you start using Blender, like do a thing and operations, and for example, you duplicate, you're gonna see this. So the changes are only visual for the time being, and it's a work in progress. There will be more work on this. We already have some ideas on how to improve it, but basically, if you remember how it used to be, there was basically little to no padding at all between the lines. There was like no padding, basically. It was just everything was mashed together, and you can still select these lines. It hasn't changed, but the color theme has changed a little bit. I'm gonna make sure that I'm using the default theme here. Reset. Yes. So the icons here, they look like buttons a bit to me. They look a bit like checkboxes, so I'm not sure yet, because luckily, actually, we can change this from the user preferences. There is a new setting under the info section here in the theme editing that you can choose the background color for the icons. For example, in this case is like the error icon or warning or info. Debug property icon, operator icon. This must be the, yes, this is the operator icon. So I kind of like it better without the background, but it makes sense to highlight, for example, the errors. So if you're trying to, like, if you're copy pasting, you get an info, which is it's the blue line. So you can actually make it, you can change the blue, or it used to be like the whole line. Maybe there are a few things to change there, but the thing that bother me the most is this big unreadable bunch of text. Two things will be great to do here. One, to disable wrapping, so the text doesn't wrap around and you can just ignore that line if you want. Or William had a nice proposal about having this compacted with like the name of the operator, for example, paste objects or subdivide or duplicate, and then this as a list of settings, so you can actually go one by one. So that would be pretty nice, and that is in the horizon. But you can go already ahead and change some of these settings. More regarding the theme. This change is in the animation editors. So I don't know if you remember, but I keep pressing Windows key, sorry. So there are some sections in Blender where, especially the animation editors, where if you had, in the action editor, you wouldn't see that much in the dope sheet. But if you go to the graph editor, these channels used to have like the whole channel colored sometimes, and it would be a bit hard to read. That's still the case for this icon, which makes it hard to read. I think this will be changed in the future. There are many proposals already. There is one in particular proposal in the developer.blender.org about moving these as separate lines here on the side, maybe, or coloring the actual text. But the coloring the whole text is weird because if it's not weird, it's just that it could backfire. If your background is red, for example, then it would be a bit hard to read. Now it's orange, which connects with the active color. It's a kind of okay. But again, if you have an orange background, it's impossible to read. So I think in the future, the ideal situation would be to make this more like the outliner. This is already proposed by Willem, to have like the different color for each row, and basically it's just like combine them, right? This is a list of items. This is a list of items. They could be similar. So yeah, that's part of the changes that were done. Another change, if you're on Linux or Windows, and I bet for Mac was already there, you can now, you're going to see now here on the side under System in the file browser, you're going to see nice little icons for the typical folders that you have on your computer. Usually the ones that are built in with, like, they come with Windows. My Documents was called in Windows, or maybe Documents now, but downloads, video, picture, music. Of course, if you have them. If you don't have them, these folders, they're not going to show up. But it just makes everything a little bit nicer with all the icons and a bit more, integrated with the system. What else? And if you're on a Mac, the slash here, the volume, is going to say Macintosh HD instead of slash. So it's maybe a bit more friendly, but I prefer the slash because slash is the actual URL. URL, but not URL. What is the other? IRL? Next. Oh, this one is nice. Well, I need to show you pictures actually, because this one is here, because it's hard to show the before and after. But here in this patch by Harley, he made it so the undo history list and operators gray out or show colored when you don't when they're not available. So in the past, everything in the edit menu would be like light up, like white. Hard to tell if you were able to actually undo or redo, or if there was even an undo history at all, or if you could repeat or not those operations. Now, actually Blender knows. And if you just started Blender and there is no operation to undo or redo, it's not going to highlight. And now if you do something, then you can undo but not redo because there is no previous option. And it's a bit smarter. So thank you, Harley. And a whole bunch of other patches that Harley contributed this over time, but this week they made it into Blender. So for example, the fonts, he updated the font symbols, so they are a bit more, they look a bit nicer overall. So they are a bit more readable. The arrows are a bit more readable. There is an ellipsis. I know this is very small news compared to the big ones we get every week, but you get like 3 ellipses instead of just 2 dots. So it's a bit nicer and more readable as well. And it uses less space. Then what else? The interface. I'm not going to show this much in detail, but the symmetrize panel has been rearranged. There were some settings in the symmetrize panel that they only show up if the topo was enabled, but they were not really relying on the dynamic topology, so there was no really reason to hide it. And also they had a panel called remesh, which was different from what we have now as remesh, like remeshing with the Quadroflow or voxel remeshing. So it was a bit confusing. This changed. So if you're used to using symmetrize and you see the interface has changed, don't panic. It's for the greater good. All right, let's move on. I'm having some tea today for my voice. Nice little improvement also to make things a bit nicer overall. This patch by Yevgeny has improved the icons so they look a bit sharper, a lot sharper actually, if you compare the bottom and the top. And if you propagate this to all of Blender, all the icons are gonna be a little bit nicer. It's so nice to have developers taking the time to look into these issues, which don't look like much, but overall make Blender look a lot more sleek. So very nice. You can see the difference here. That is more blurry and this is more like on point. Very nice, making Blender look expensive. And the last one, speaking of expensive, if you have a Mac and you want to use a trackpad Smart Zoom, which is, I think it's tapping with double tap with 2 fingers, there is now an event attached to it, and by default, it's set to local view. So if you are on a Mac with a trackpad, you can double tap with 2 fingers and it's going to enter local view and zoom in the selection that you have. So pretty nice for those that have a Mac and can use those events. What else? More contributions. So Cody Winchester, yes, he's been contributing a whole bunch of little patches that add the vertex group setting for many modifiers. For example, the warp modifier, the displace modifier. So now if you have a displace modifier, which is one of the most popular ones, it's in the form displace. Now you can here press the little arrow, which is already in some other modifiers, but not in all of them. Now display has it as the same as cast modifier, warp modifier, and a whole bunch of other ones. So very nice, super awesome. Thank you, Cody, for coding that feature. Let's move on. All right, miscellaneous. Shading. There is a new setting in the white noise node. So if you go to shading, and you search for white noise, now it not only has the value output, but also the color output. So if we actually, I don't have the patch here, but it's in, let's see if I can search it, but basically it's a color, so it's just a noise, colorful output. And I should have used here, add color output to white noise. I was gonna complain about the search engine of the developer.blender.today, but it's actually not too bad. So yeah, this is it. The implementation basically just makes this colorful output come from the output node. So as you can see, it's actually different. The way he implemented it first was with a drop-down menu. Drop-down to select color or value. And that's when the developers jump in and say, yes, the implementation is fine, but in interface-wise, in Blender, we always expose all the outputs, especially for value and color. It's very common to expose it. So if we have one node that doesn't expose it, I use a drop-down menu instead, is not consistent, and consistency is key for Blender and for software in general, but it's good, better for developers and users and everybody and the world if it was most consistent, which is super nice. Isn't it nice that the world is consistent, that you can drive here and in Argentina and you still manage to get your way around because the signs are the same? Yes, for consistency. Imagine if they were different. Some thoughts that happen when you get to drive in different countries is just crazy. You know what else is crazy? That in the video editing, video editors, the sequence video editor, last week I showed you that we have tools now. So for example, if you had a strip and you press T, you have the tools where you can, for example, just enter in cut tool and then start cutting around. I showed this feature, but I didn't show the other feature is that you can adjust last operations, just like you can do it in the 3D view and in the image editor. I think you can now also do it in the sequence editor, where you can change, for example, where you want to cut it, when you want to perform the cut or the channel or what kind of cut. And this might not be like the most useful task, like to redo like the cutting, because you're already probably done cutting. Maybe you want to undo and move it to a different frame. But for in the future, for other operations, that is much more useful. And I bet there are more settings. The more we start adding settings to those operators, the better it's gonna get. So for example, multicam selector and frame. And is anybody use the multicam? I used it once when it was added, but I never really used it again. It's actually pretty powerful. That's a potential here, like Tasty Brains mentions in the chat. Let's continue. All right, I'm almost getting to the end of the list. So GLTF importer in just a bunch of, I just was looking at the commit logs and it was like, bam, giant list of commits by Julian. So improvements, fixes, all kinds of stuff. So pretty nice for those using GLTF format. And this one that is a tiny step towards, for Linux users, for all 5 Linux users that are watching this, including myself, because I left my computer watching there just to add an extra viewer. I'm cheating. The first step in a long staircase of moving into Wayland support, backend support for Blender. So pretty nice to see that Christian Rausch is taking the task, this giant task of moving away from X11, and people from Windows and Mac probably don't know what I'm talking about, and you don't need to know. You know what you need to know is that the future is awesome. And this section could just be the Twitter of Pablo Navarro. I could just make a whole Blender.Today episode, just looking at a screen. Actually, there are some YouTube channels that do this, basically. I'm not going to point fingers, but basically they just open a browser and start going through the news. So in this case, there is okay, let's go to the beginning. Let's go to the first, the madness here. There is one with like 14,700 likes. You know how much likes a Blender release has on Twitter? It was like 3. I'm not going to look at it, but a Blender release has like 3K likes. And this feature is so insane that it goes beyond the Blender community and people start sharing it like crazy, because you can sculpt clothing with sculpt. You can sculpt clothes. That's the end of the sentence. Yeah. So there is a new brush, apparently, that it's on a patch that Pablo Navarro is working on. This is work in progress, more like a proof of concept at the beginning. Now he's adding, look at the amount of love that people are giving it. And he totally earned it, because it's just insane. So the fact that he implemented a solver for the brush while you're sculpting. So boom, you draw and you're. Of course, this is gonna be heavy on performance, I guess, and like it's gonna be a big hit for performance, but it only affects the simulation. It only affects the radio of your brush. So if you make the brush like huge, then it's gonna be a bit slower. But if you keep it in a sane level, then it should be fine. And of course, this is a proof of concept, and there is lots of room for improvements. He is already doing a bunch of improvements. So it's combining it with other features in Blender, such as masking. So in this case, he's masking out an area that is not going to be affected but by the cloud simulation. So it's sort of like when you pin a section of your mesh. For example, if you're doing a flag, the typical example, and you pin the side, so it moves around. The masking of vertices is not going to be affected by the brush. So you can make it, for example, this like a table, like your elbows or like your knees on your pants and stuff. So insane. So more. What is this? You can use the cloth brush directly on meshes with millions of... yeah, this is what I was explaining before, that as long as you keep the radius rather small, then it should be fine. If you, of course, zoom out in a 40 million polygon, it's going to be a bit slow. But who cares? In real life, meshes don't have that many vertices. Let's see. So he's now showing off all these features, like the pose brush that he implemented, and we talked about it more in the past. The pose brush for posing, and then using the clothes brush to make it nice wrinkles on your mesh. And it's just super nice that you can actually combine those tools. There is a fall off setting which drags cloth from an entire cross section of the model at the same time. Just awesome. Just awesome. All right. What else? New deformation mode to the cloth brush that changes dynamically the original dimensions of the cloth during the simulation. So it makes this kind of stuff. It's just mind blowing. This way you can create the effect of stitching a large piece of cloth to a smaller one by using the sculpt mask. Awesome. And this one is like when you're, when you try to make the table, when your mom tells you go and set up the table, and you try to put the the tablecloth, and on one side it gets wrong and you pull it and on the other side is wrong. Well, you can do that now. And while you're doing it, it's also changing the cursor display to be 2 arrows. So it's like it's more like you can see that it's affecting a plane instead of a radius, like circular. So amazing. Great job, Pablo Navarro. Remember that he has a patch going on, and this is work in progress. Still not part of Blender 2.82, of course, because there are no new features over 2.82. Hopefully 2.83, if it manages to make it before the end of the Beacon 1 period. I hope that will be amazing if this could be there soon. But yeah, it's awesome. So remember, Pablo Navarro is working for Blender full-time thanks to Blender Development Fund. Yes, shameless plug. No shame in sharing this, because this is actually what keeps development going. So if you ever consider, it's a good moment to choose your membership of the Blender Development Fund and help keep Blender development going strong. Next, what else is amazing? New object types in Blender. So Brecht van Lommel is developer since forever. He made cycles, among other things. He is working on adding new object types, and there is a branch. It is not yet in Blender, but here, for example, there is a little screenshot that is a picture that of the screen while he was working that the light took. So super nice to see, like you see something fun and you go take a picture. So here we can see actually point density, work in progress, volume in workbench, EV and cycles, and the new hair object type. So yeah, we're gonna have soon when you do Shift A, you're gonna see a whole bunch of new guys here. Isn't that awesome? Cool. All right. So what else? Oh, and there is a new branch for draw color management, but I don't have any screenshots of that, and it's work in progress anyway. All right. Let's continue. Let's move and let's jump into the questions. How's everything going, by the way? Is everything okay? Yes, new guys in the add menu. Awesome. Cool. We need a proper particle system that is also user-friendly. Yes, that is the Everything Nodes project. The first part of the Everything Node project is going to be tackling the now end-of-life particle system in Blender to make particles with nodes and blow the mind of people, and animals or pets also can be mind blown. So, right. Let's go here. Momotron 2000, thank you for making the thread. Here goes a thumbs up. Feel free to thumbs up also his thread. And the first question by Abramax Brizar. By the way, remember you can heart those questions so they show up higher in the list. And then I make sure that I get to answer them before the rest. So, hi Pablo, first post here. Hey, welcome aboard. I want to ask, when do you think Eevee will have object motion blur added? I think that's the one feature that will make it production ready. That and maybe ray tracing, real-time ray tracing, but Cycles is amazing enough already. Keep up the good work, guys. So yes, motion blur. Actually, there is a project that we are working on here at the studio. That is not Cosmos Laundromat. It's another short film that is going to be announced this week, hopefully, on the Blender cloud. And it's a very short film. It's like a minute or so. It's just it started like an animation test. Not going to spoil that much, but we want to render it with Eevee. Eevee. Real time. Ish, because you need a lot of compositing if you want to make it nice. But we're going to use Eevee passes, and the idea also was to implement motion blur for that. However, talking with the developers, implementing that is going to take at least a month of full-time work just dedicated to adding motion blur, and that is, or more even. That's just an estimate. So I'm not sure if it's going to be if it could be done. Maybe adding vector blurs from Cycles. That's actually, you can do it already. There is, if you go to YouTube, I saw a video of somebody saying like Eevee Cycles motion blur. There was one, maybe it's this one. Yeah, I think it was this one. So basically, you can watch it, watch this video, but or play Grand Theft Auto as well. But in here, there are basically, long story short, just use the Cycles vectors pass inside of Eevee. So you can do it. Yes, it's kind of hacky, but yes. We tried a few other ways of doing it. The maybe like full motion blur, which is full sample motion blur, which is what the Blender internal used to do. We're basically rendering the same frame, the frame and I don't know, 3 frames before and after, but that was too slow. So it would mean rendering like 100 frames for a 24 frame per second animation per frame. So has its pros and cons, but we're gonna study the options. Next, Nuno Conceição. Hi Pablo, any news on when we could expect some progress update on the library overrides? Also, will these overrides include the possibility of having different render settings per render layer? So updates. If you want to follow the project, actually you can do so in many places. But luckily, last week, Dalai published this blog post about the big projects of 2020 for Blender. One of them being library overrides. It's connected also with the asset manager, but library overrides, they landed in Blender 2.81, but in a very, how do you call it, work in progress state. So there are already many improvements in 2.82, but there is a lot of to-dos that need to be done. So here you can read more about it in the task that you can see here, 73.318. So yes, maybe I can reply to you here. If you're watching, you can read more about it. Or I can actually get to the reply. Oh, I'm logged in as Francesco. That's nice. Okay, so next. I'm going to like this. Oh, and if we're going to include the possibility of having different render settings per render layer, not yet, but that's planned. That's one of the things we wanted to do. Actually, for per view layer, and which is the same-ish, and also maybe per collection. That will be pretty good. What happened to the 3D Gizmo icons? This is the very first iteration of the icons. The latest one is what you see here, but yeah, they were not very popular, these icons here. Next question by Cobra. Besides replacing proxies with library overrides, any updates coming to rigging in Blender? It's not getting any major upgrades, and honestly, it's one of the parts that keep it behind other major 3D softwares. Yes and no. It's like there is many areas that keep it. Like if you ask any other BlenderHead is going to say that their favorite section is what is lagging behind other 3D softwares. Rigging itself, it actually, if you look at the updates by Alexander Gavrilov, he's a developer. Let's see if I can find there. He actually has been making a lot of improvement. I think that was his name. Yes, I remember. Full even. So he's been now is working a lot now also on fixes, on back fixing. But he made lots of improvements on B-bones, on modifiers, on constraints, on. We need a section where we can actually mention all of the improvements. If you go to Blender Wiki release logs, let's see if we can find them here. Not for 2.81, but 282, animation and rigging. We can see here that bones, there is new options in bones, constraints, new modes, compatibility for those constraints. There is a option for playblast. Well, this is more animation itself. Improvements in F-core selection and transforming. Well, this is more like the animation editors. But these few features, together with the features that were added before, not in this section, but for 2.81, section animation, when it loads, animation and rigging, there's also a bunch of improvements or bones, drivers, new constraints, new options in the constraints, custom properties, settings, and animation curves. So I wouldn't say there is no updates. It's just that there is maybe not as many as in the other areas. But once we get modifier nodes, that also improve the rigging section. And yes, playblast only keyframe. That's a new feature that you're gonna find in, I think I never explained it, but here in the view menu of the 3D view, you're gonna find viewport render keyframes. So it renders an animation of only the keyframe, a playblast of only the keyframes. All right, next question by Antoine. Hello, Pablo. I've been using Grease Pencil for a while to do set design sketches and find there is a feature that would be super useful to implement, which is a transform tool, like a simple gizmo with rotation translation to place the 3D cursor precisely. Okay, so it's like a transform tool for 3D cursor. Right now, the snapping behavior, when you have a lot of Grease Pencil objects and a few geometry in a scene, seems very random and quite off. And I find myself using values in the 3D view to set them. Not ideal. There used to be a plugin that kind of did it. Yes, would be super useful. The 3D cursor is lagging in snapping tools. Now it got better in 2.82, but it's a bit behind, and I agree with that one. Next. Hi, Pablo. Last month I was in Patagonia, really. El Bolsón, I was there also last month in February and in January. Super nice. Patagonia, my favorite place in the world. Your question is, I was trying to read the Blender code, but I just messed around and lost myself. So I asked if you could do some Blender.Today like video showing the basics to dive into Blender code. That could be fun. How would you call it? Blender.Today, Blender Code Day. Yeah, that could be fun. I could try and get, maybe after this project, I'm working on the animation project that I mentioned. So it's been a bit busy, but maybe I can try and get Dalai to help out, and maybe at some time we can do a little dive into the code like Blender.Today. Do it together. Next question. Is Project MPX still in development by Pepperland? They haven't said anything in about 8 months now. Yes and no. Actually, yes, it is in progress. I think they can say it. He could say it better, but from what I've seen, is still working on it. There was a presentation at the Blender conference, which is not 8 months ago. Or is it? No. 4 months ago. Blender conference. 3 months. It's 3 months ago. So there has been updates. And he's always posting on social media, so you should follow him there. the thing is that some of this development or the project MPX is aligned with development. This is more like a proof of concept, just like messing around trying to get the workflow. But it's nothing like it's not like grease pencil development. Like it's more like discovering and trying to find a workflow. However, the project that Julian Eisel is working on, it aligns with it, the VR in Blender, OpenXR. Next question, Damian. Hi, Pablo. I remember the streams when you have been drinking beer at home while telling us about Blender development progress. That was cozy and chilling atmosphere. I know, right? This is like super boring and sober. I'm looking forward, and I'm all by myself today, except for my friend over here. But it's been a lonely setup here. However, they're working downstairs to make a more dedicated place for Blender.Today and the tutorials that we record, because we record tutorials for Blender Cloud right here in this same computer, same setup. The idea is that we share all the gear, but we're going to have a dedicated place, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. We don't know yet, but that's the idea. And I promise I'm going to make it more cozy. I might even bring back the flag, the Amsterdam flag, and the Christmas lights, and maybe even the beer could come back. I can say that it's without, maybe I can buy it without alcohol. That would be a good idea. Nowadays, they make really good beer without alcohol. Like for real, like an IPA, super nice. Anyway, next, sorry. Sidetrack. I wonder why there is no polyline hand drawing instrument in mesh edit mode. Sometimes it's very needful. What do you think? For instance, it could be used in organic modeling conjunction with skin modifier, or it could be used as a Boolean cutter. So what do you mean? Like polygon, like for example, like doing control click to add like this, for example. You can't even see there. Okay. But control click, it's it basically control right click in the left click key map. It adds vertices where we are. So it's kind of a adding vertices. It's like a poly build, but on for lines, if I understood correctly. So let's continue. It says, how could I help with the icons design? Where to start from? Where to get tasks from? How to commit my designs? So usually you can find it here in the, maybe a good place would be in Dev Talk to contribute. There is a thread already for icons, if I'm not wrong. New icons for 2.8. And you can, here, Gendrix, he is the main designer now working on the icons. So you could get in touch with him, or just write here in the thread or maybe make a new thread and point and maybe mention him, and so you can collaborate. But here you can see all the new icons that have been added. Which there are a few actually, I forgot to mention them, but there are a few new icons in the interface in Blender. Here I have actually the thread, which I didn't share, but there's new icon for redirected folder, for auto clamped handle types, and for text strips. And always thank you to Andre Ambrosch, or also known as Gendrix. All right. Next, Pietro Belgioco. Hey, Pablo, quick question and big hope. Will there be any chance to have a new cloth simulation and soft body simulation system, possibly based on the Vivace paper? And why not a unified cloth soft body hair unified system? Hey, asking a lot here. After so many years with the current implementation, a new multi-thread implementation will be very welcome. But actually, there is a new, but I mentioned last week that during the weeklies, the Blender Institute on Fridays, we get together and we share stuff about what we did during the week. And this caught my attention, this video by Sebastian Pargor. We got him here at the live stream a few times. So this is the current system, very slow and not multi-threaded. And he is working on maybe implementing this system, which is multi-threaded. So there are some maybe bright future opportunities for the soft body system in Blender. Next question, when will Eevee get real-time ray tracing? I don't think any time soon before the Vulkan implementation. I think Vulkan will bring Blender Eevee into it's like the next step for everything, like baking even with Eevee would make it much easier when we have Vulkan, and also making it work on Max also should be easier. All right, I think I reached all of the questions with the like, so I'm gonna start from the bottom to be fair with the people that actually posted before. Joseph Berg says, hey Pablo, got any updates on light groups? I remember reading that they were added along with the new custom AOVs. They're invaluable for lighting characters. Yes and no, actually they were added as part of, I don't know if it was the same patch, but they were on the same build on graphical.org. So on Graphical, the community managed website where people can contribute their builds, their custom Blender builds, there was a one that had both. So I don't know if it was the same patch or it was just coincidence, but I'm also waiting for that. And I haven't heard any news from it, but I cannot wait to have it. I tried it and it's like night and day. It really changes your way of lighting, having light groups. Yeah, and it's very common in other big render engines. Next question, Mille Porte, hard surface. Hi Pablo, what are the most important incoming features for hard surface modeling and CAD in general? The main problem is that hard surface modeling arises when combining Boolean and bevel operator. There are some news to solve it. Are there some news to solve it? Well, there's an improvement on the Boolean coming up, which doesn't have a date, but it was announced if in the Ask Me Anything. So YouTube, I have a shortcut on Chrome to search on YouTube. What is the recommendation? No, and it was Blender Conference 2019. Ask anything for the developers. Here, ask me anything of the developers. Here, somewhere towards the end, there is a mention of the Booleans by Howard. So somewhere here, I think I found it. So somewhere around here, you're gonna see him talking about the Boolean. So that's all I can say. But maybe the retopo might help. Bonus question, vertex groups in subdivision modifiers are needed to avoid adding a lot of extra unwanted geometry. Will there ever be implemented? I haven't heard of this one either, but it depends on OpenSubdiv. I don't know if this is supported. Extra, look at the feature, nonlinear creasing from another software. Very cool. Ah, so some areas. Yeah, wow, that's pretty nice. Yeah, this is super nice. Non-linear creasing. I haven't tested it if it's even possible in other softwares. All right. Let's continue. Schosenberg, Pablo, any idea why this has been closed? Finish Basics and Amber Engine. Assets Engine. Finish the Basics. Yeah, because the new approach to the Assets Engine is to do the basics. And you can read more about it in the code blog list here. If you go Asset Manager Basics. So that task was closed because a new one was open with that links to all of the other ones. So for example, it's mentioned here, and this should point to the other tasks. So basically it's just some reorganization to make things a bit more clear. That's why it got closed. Next question, Christian Emil. Keep it up, Pablo. You're doing amazing. Thank you very much, Christian. And all right, we have 2 minutes left for the show. So let's do 5 more questions. Yes. Chris Cavaluzzi. Hey, Pablo, thank you for putting on this amazing show. Thank you very much for watching it. Question, what are you personally most excited? Oh, what I am personally most excited about in the future of Blender. That's a very, nobody has asked me that before. like like it reminds me of the genie in Aladdin what would you wish for? Nobody asked me that before. Okay, what big fan of NPR, so non-photorealistic rendering. So what I'm most excited about is the future that Grace Pencil has, together with being more integrated with Eevee and LandPR, or like some replacement for Freestyle, because Freestyle is very slow at the moment and it's only a post-process, so it doesn't work on real time as LandPR does. So that, I think that's what I'm most excited about. And VR, being able to model and paint and texture and Grease Pencil and animate in VR. I think that's pretty interesting. Together, combined with the NPR, it's just like mind-blowing. Thank you for the question. That's very nice. And that was question number 5. So 4, John. Hey, Pablo, I like how Blender can have the comp in the same file as the 3D scene. Yes, that's awesome, isn't it? You can actually have everything inside one. You can even have the video editing inside of the same blend file. If you want, and you could have the whole movie inside, because each scene in Blender is like a new blend file with a new output file, new render engine, new anything. So, sorry, sidetracked. What is the correct workflow for toggling between running the comp and render together, then and just running the comp and then rerunning the render? What is the correct workflow for toggling between running the comp and render together and just running? Well, it depends. It depends on how complex is your setup. So if you're doing like hardcore compositing, maybe you just want to render render and output as EXR. That will be like the smartest way of doing it, is to just change the output of your file type and just use OpenEXR multilayer. That way you're going to save a completely like pretty much uncompressed output with high resolution, high dynamic range colors, HDR, and also all the passes that you have for compositing. So that way you can, when you're doing the compositing, you can basically just input those files and do the compositing alone. So you don't have to re-render every time. You can just basically render the view layer that you want with this little button over here that it's pretty often overlooked. This little icon here will render only the view layer or render layer that you have selected. So that way, if you have your scene set it up in a way that each view layer is rather fast to render, then you don't have to re-render everything, the whole setup. So yeah, basically depends on how complex is your scene. If it's very complex, save to EXR is gonna make your life much easier. But if it's just one file and you don't mind waiting and the render is not that slow, just re-render again. You also remember you can reread your render, your view layers with the node read view layers, and it's gonna reread them in case you made any change. But that's just my workflow from my experience of working in advertisement or in feature films. Usually that how it's done. Tobias Kumar, feature film. I only work in 2 feature films with Blender, both of them. Tobias Kumar says, is it possible to check for bots over the jobs board? There seems to be an automatic. Oh, yes. Okay, I will note that down. Thank you for the note. We have some spam issues lately on here and in the chat and everywhere, which is good. Actually, the Blender.Org was down a few days ago because some bot. So yeah, it's being attacked, but that's nice. It means you're popular. Number 2, I guess. Hi, how are you? I'm good, thank you. How are you? Landscape Generator can do everything crucial, but it's slow and consumes a lot of memory. What is Landscape Generator? I'm assuming it's some kind of add-on. while height map of the same resolution takes an iteration. Any speed up planned for it? Landscape generator is not well, maybe it comes with Blender, I guess, but it's an add-on, so it has its own developers working on it. Landscape, yeah, it's not here even. Testing? No. Landscape generator. It must be an add-on. Don't confuse community add-ons with Blender official add-ons, yeah, the ones that come with Blender, or the ones that are made by the Blender Foundation. Next, Paul Hartzauker. 2 weeks ago, Dalai, hi by the way, I'm kidding. Dalai Felinto mentioned a meeting with an independent studio who might be connected to NPR development for Blender. Any news? Currently, Freestyle may not have project maintainer and crashes on a weak use of particles. I just checked and it kept going longer than before. It's actually very slow. And the other day, Andy here was using it. He mentioned that he was using it and the render was taking 30 seconds and Freestyle like 8 minutes or so. So yeah. It needs to be multi-threaded for speed. LandPR is neglected with no pause or changes on the dev threads. Yeah, that's one of the... well, I just talked about it, that it's one of the projects that I really hope it could take off, but it needs a dedication of the developers, really. It's just, it's a pity though, because it's such an amazing project, but probably it's not so simple. The Google Summer of Code program had 2 years of LandPR development and still wasn't enough. So yeah, it's apparently not that easy. Yeah, let's do one more. I don't want to finish in a sad note. Ludovic Lotoa. Hello, Pablo. Thanks for the awesome job you guys are doing. Maybe you have already had this question, but I have not found a clear answer. Will 3ds file make a comeback to Blender 2.8? 3ds support for importing was part of Blender 2.7, but was never really maintained. And during the 2.8 development, which took a year, more than a year, super long time until 2.8 came out, there was a call for the developers of all the add-ons to update them to the latest 2.8 API, Python API. 3ds, the format 3ds was not part of those. It didn't get really any attention from the developers that were working on it. Many people say they already were switching to FBX or other formats, or GLTF or even OBJ. No, they wouldn't switch to that one, but they were using it as a backup. So unfortunately, there is no support, like any developer interested in doing it, in keeping that one up to date. But if someone from the community wants to update it, I bet the developers will be happy to get it back. And I think with that, I can finish talking for 1 hour. I'm not really a talkative kind of person, so when I do this once a week, my voice goes off. All right, now, come over. I need some moral help here. It's hard to make a live stream all 1 hour talking to a screen and hanging out here with hundreds of people. How many hundreds? We're up to, wow, 850 people. I can't believe it. I cannot believe it. Thank you for chilling and hanging out over here. It's super nice. Very nice. The Blender developers, Dalai Felinto and Don Roosendaal and Francesco City were at FOSDEM in Belgium last weekend, and apparently it was super nice to hang out with other free and open source software developers and the community. So that's also nice. The people hang out and developers of the open source projects get to share a moment like we do here every week together and to talk about everything that's new in Blender. It's just crazy how it escapes the what we do here. You know, there's things going on in the community somewhere in other countries that are pushing and moving this software forward. Thanks to the support of you people that come and cheer for it and use it and report bugs and submit and even test bugs from other people. It's really a community effort that I don't think any company in the world could afford having such an army of people with the passion, because you could pay people, but it's not gonna be with the same passion as people that do it out of love for sharing what open source is. So thank you for staying until the end. It's been a pleasure. Let's do this again next time. Yes, it's gonna be the 10th of February. Ooh, awesome. And we should be already passing we should be almost ready for release of Blender 2.82. That would be exciting. And 2.83 should become beta. Not yet. I think there's still another week. So probably some developers are gonna rush into getting all the features in before the alpha period ends, because they're not gonna have the time to add any more features, and that will be moved to 2.84. That's crazy. That 2.82 is not even out. We're already talking about 2.84. All right, cool. Let's do it again next week, same place, same time. But first, let's go with style. So if you're wearing headphones, watch out, because it's gonna blow your ear holes in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you for staying until the end. It's been a pleasure. We'll see you again next week, same place, same time, for another Blender Today live. Bye-bye.